3, 2, 1.
Hello and happy Sunday morning. Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Happy Hour podcast. We are going to continue team previews looking at the NFC South today. This is the last Sunday before the NFL season actually begins because preseason kicks off on Thursday with the Hall of Fame game. So we're inching ever closer. Before I dive into the NFC South, let's talk about some news and notes. Probably the biggest scare from camp so far this week was Justin Fields. He was reportedly taken off on a cart from practice. That led to a lot of consternation, a little bit of trepidation and fear. Just dislocated a toe, and I'm not saying this is not a big deal, but could be a lot worse. So Jets fans may be breathing a little sigh of relief. Meanwhile, for the Bengals, Shamar Stewart finally signed the last of the first-round picks to end his holdout. A couple of other injury notes. The Houston Texans saying Joe Mixon expected to miss some extended time that could leak into the regular season. That is going to be something to watch, especially if you are hoping to rely on Mixon, if you have him in Dynasty or are looking at drafting. Could be a good uptick for Nick Chubb, who signed with the Houston Texans. Dameon Pierce is also still injured right now. They also have the rookie Woody Marks. Interesting to see how it goes for the Texans. In Tennessee, there had been talk about Treylon Burks maybe having a resurgence. Cam Ward mentioned him in a positive light, talked about their great connection. Well, naturally, he broke his collarbone. He is expected to miss quite a bit of time as well. So that is the way the cookie crumbles. Well, let's turn to our division preview. And as I mentioned today, it's the NFC South. So as you know, when we go through these previews, I look at the teams in order of finish last year, give you a little info about them, and then I'll tell you what I am expecting for the regular season. So the winner from last year was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Buccaneers finished at 10-7. They lost the first round at home to the Washington Commanders, who made it all the way to the NFC Championship game, so no shame in the game there. They didn't have a lot of losses. Their center Robert Hainsey left. They lost linebacker Joe Tryon and J.K. Britt. They also lost safety Mike Edwards. In the draft, they picked up wide receiver Emeka Egbuka. They also picked up pass rusher Hassan Reddick at linebacker. Last year, Baker Mayfield was quarterback 4. Rashad White, running back 22. Bucky Irving as a rookie, running back 13. Mike Evans, steady as always, wide receiver 14. Chris Godwin was wide receiver 2 on a points per game basis before getting injured and lost for the season. Finished as wide receiver 53. Jalen McMillan as a rookie, wide receiver 55. Cade Otton, tight end 14. There is an embarrassment of riches in this passing game. They changed offensive coordinators again, as Liam Cohen is now the coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team we'll talk about next week when we look at the AFC South. But I like what they've got going on offense. I still think Tampa Bay probably the best team in their division. Once again, all the other teams in this division a little bit in flux. We will talk about that as we go along. They go 4 deep at receiver. They have a good tight end. They have 2 good running backs. I think they are pretty well set. As long as this line holds up and as long as their defense holds up, I think they will be a strong contender for the playoffs and maybe a strong contender in the playoffs again this year. Next up, the Atlanta Falcons. They finished 8-9 last year. They had lofty aspirations going into the season, having picked up Kirk Cousins, but that just didn't work out. He ended up getting benched, and we saw the rookie Michael Penix Jr. step in to finish the last 3 games. Penix, the starter going into this season. Among their losses, Rondale Moore, but he was injured, missed all of last year. Defensive tackles, Grady Jarrett and Eddie Goldman, and they lost safety Richie Grant and Justin Simmons. This offseason, they really focused on that defense. They brought in Leonard Floyd. They drafted Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr. to give their pass rush a boost. Last year, Kirk Cousins was quarterback 21 for the season. He wasn't as bad as I think the perception is out there. Michael Penix finished as quarterback 45. Again, only 3 starts, so that is pretty impressive. Bijan Robinson, running back 3. Tyler Algier, a great number 2, was running back 43. Drake London, a huge breakout season, wide receiver 5. Darnell Mooney, wide receiver 31. He's a little nicked up right now, so that is something to watch. And Kyle Pitts, tight end 15. Hope springs eternal for Kyle Pitts. He was supposed to be a revolutionary game changer at tight end when he came in. We have seen flashes of it at times, but we have not seen it consistently. Can it happen in the final year of his 5-year rookie deal? Hard to say. Bijan Robinson, I'm betting on. He should be one of the top running backs. He should be going early in draft. If you have him in Dynasty, you're feeling good. Drake London, I think a top 12 wide receiver potential again. I liked the way Mooney filled into this offense. It'll be interesting to see how things go with Penix. I think a mid to low end QB2 is about right. That is actually where Cousins ended up last year. Penix, this is still essentially like going through a rookie year. I know he started 3 games at the end of last year, but you're going to be going through a lot. There is a lot different when you're the guy from week 1. They still have Cousins on the roster. It seems like it's going to be financially prohibitive from them to move on from him, so he will probably be there. Will he play some games? How much pressure is on Penix? That's going to be interesting to watch. They have some great pieces on offense. Defense is still a work in progress. And as a whole, I just don't know if they're a lot better than they were last year. Number 3 team in that division was the Carolina Panthers. They were only 5-12 last season. Running back Miles Sanders moved on to the Cowboys. They let go of tight end Ian Thomas. Shaq Thompson, the linebacker, and Xavier Woods, the safety, also gone. This last season, they added Rico Dowdle in the running back room and drafted Trevor Etienne. So they have great backups behind Chuba Hubbard. Behind Chuba Hubbard, their young rookie from last year, Jonathan Brooks, had torn his ACL again. He is not likely to play at all this season, so it's probably going to be Hubbard, Dowdle, and ATN. They drafted Ted McMillan in the first round to give them a new big wide receiver. They got Christian Roseboom and Trevon Morig at safety. Bryce Young was quarterback 20 last year. Chuba Hubbard was running back 14. Dowdle was actually running back 23, had his own 1,000-yard season in Dallas. Xavier Legette was wide receiver 60 in his rookie year. Adam Thielen, the veteran, was wide receiver 52. It was an up and down year for Bryce Young. 2 horrible games to start under new coach Dave Canales. They ended up benching him. They went to the veteran Andy Dalton. He had some good numbers, but the team wasn't really winning, so they went back to Young. He actually finished the season fairly strong. They were only 5-12, but they were a tough out, and they were kind of a fun team to watch. I think now, second year under Canales, we expect another step forward in year 3 for Bryce Young. I like the addition of Ted McMillan. I like the way he fits with Xavier Legette and the veteran Adam Thielen. They have a good young tight end prospect in Jatavian Sanders, and they have some running backs. I think this will be a frisky team. Are they good enough to make a playoff push this year? That remains to be seen. How will the defense come along? How much progress can this young team make? But they are definitely a much more fun team to watch than they were in years previous. The 4th place team a year ago was the New Orleans Saints. They finished also 5-12. Among their losses, Derek Carr, their quarterback, retired. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, the wide receiver, followed his former offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, over to the Seattle Seahawks. They let go of Peyton Turner at defensive end and Willie Gay Jr. at linebacker. Kellen Moore is now in at head coach. He should be taking over the offense as well. They drafted Tyler Shook in the 2nd round. They brought back veteran wide receiver Brandon Cooks. They got Kelvin Banks at offensive line in the 1st round. They brought in veteran safety Justin Reed and veteran defensive end Chase Young. Derek Carr was quarterback 26 last year. Spencer Rattler, who started 7 games and lost them all, was quarterback 41. Alvin Kamara, running back 9. Chris Olave, who missed a lot of the season with concussions, wide receiver 94. Rashid Shaheed, who missed a lot of the season with another injury, was wide receiver 92. Brandon Cooks, wide receiver 96 for the Cowboys. Juwan Johnson was tight end 17. They resigned him this offseason to a long-term contract. This offense, a little bit of a mess. It starts at quarterback. Will it be Shook? Will it be Spencer Rattler? Will it be Jake Hayner, who is going into his 3rd year now? He was a low-end draft choice. So they have 3 young quarterbacks, no clear probably front runner, although I think it's going to be Shook. You know, he's a guy that Kellen Moore drafted. They took him in the second round. They gave him a guaranteed contract. I think he will probably be the guy. I wouldn't be surprised if we see 2 or 3 starting quarterbacks as we did last year as well. Kamara, probably the rock on the offense. I expect him to be another, very solid running back one, likely for fantasy purposes. I think he's got plenty of talent and should be a good bankable draft pick. I feel a little less confident about Chris Olave than in previous years. He feels like he's kind of in that Tua Tagovailoa range where concussions are not something you want to mess with. He had that issue in college. It has reared its ugly head again. Will it be a lingering concern? It's hard to know, but it feels like 1 or 2 big hits, and he could definitely be gone again, and maybe for a lot longer. So that is something to watch. That is certainly a concern. Shaheed kind of bouncing back from injury, has a very specific role. Cook's getting older, maybe adds a little something in the passing game. Juwan Johnson, they seem to like what he's doing. But I think this offense is still kind of a mess and probably on the verge of a transition. How good is the defense? We shall see. You know, Dennis Allen was not only their head coach, but probably the architect of that defense. So what are they doing now in New Orleans? New Orleans feels like a mess, and that feels like a good place to start. I always end by wrapping up the division. I kind of gave it away. I still think Tampa Bay has the best roster, is the best team in this division. I expect them to win. I think that they can be between 10 and 12 wins. I think they can be a strong playoff contender. I think they are low. They are clearly the best. The Falcons and the Panthers, to me, are teams with some young players, with some good pieces that will be frisky at times, that will be fun to watch, but I don't know how successful they're going to be at winning consistently. And that is one of the hardest things, especially with young players and young teams, to get dialed down. Raheem Morris and Dave Canales have their work cut out for them as the coaches there. I think, both teams will be in the 7 to 9 win range. They'll be frisky, but I don't think either makes the playoffs this year. And I know that's probably not what Falcon fans want to hear, because they were excited going into last year. It seemed like the Falcons were tracking toward potentially having a really great season and maybe making a run to the playoffs, and it just never materialized. As for the Saints, I think they might be the worst team in the league. They certainly are tracking to have that potential, and they probably are nearing the point where they need to do a complete rebuild. Is Kamara here next year? Is Cooks, Shaheed, or Olave there next year? Those are all good questions. Are some of the veterans on defense going to get cleared out? They have the kind of roster where I would not be surprised if they only win 1 or 2 games and end up as the number 1 overall pick, in which case you have a chance to get a different franchise quarterback, which is probably something they do, and maybe start all over. The Saints feel like a team that is approaching a cliff of big transition. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Kellen Moore can pull it all together, but I think a lot of things would have to break right for the Saints to have a successful season and to make any kind of push towards the playoffs. And I just don't see that happening at this point in time. Well, that'll be a wrap on the NFC South. I'll be back next week talking about the AFC South as we move ever closer to opening day. Until then, have a wonderful Sunday.